Welcome to day one of Hot Takes from a Philosophical Hairstylist. As a hairstylist, it's really interesting because, and I don't want to offend any anthropologists out there when I say this, but it does really feel like studying people. Like, I'm not a trained anthropologist, but especially the way people talk is really interesting to me. And it's not that I sit there and dissect all my clients, but I'm always getting these inputs from people from very different backgrounds and demographics. I'm hearing a lot of information and opinions from lots of different people, and I kind of pick up on some general things shifting in society. So welcome to day one of Hairstylist Rants. That said, hot take from a hairstylist who hears about people's emotions all day: stop hating people for not having gone through anything. There's this weird thing in certain social groups of looking down on people who haven't been through enough, people who haven't suffered as much as you or in the same ways that you did. I think for people who have dealt with mental illness, physical illness, or trauma, there's this sense of bonding with other people who have experienced difficult things too, and that is amazing. It is a bond like few others, but it also breeds this kind of attitude of like, oh, those people don't get us. They're so simple for not having gone through anything. They're so simple for not having suffered like we have. We're complicated. We're not like the other girls. We have trauma. And it's really sad because this sideways grief we have for people who act their actual age and enjoy their lives robs us of enjoying healthy relationships with people who could be good examples for us, because we've demonized growing up without suffering. And before you're like, I don't need them for an example, if you grew up in a household without healthy boundaries, a household without healthy parenting, then it could help you to be around people who did grow up with a healthy environment as a kid, because they have a totally different worldview than you. Getting to know them, that could be helpful for you. Not to mention, like, they could just be cool people and you're counting them out before you know anything about them. And when I say sideways grief, what I'm talking about is, for example, when people in older generations say, when I was growing up, we didn't have it that easy, and saying it like as a jab at younger people, that is sideways grief. What you would think they should be saying is, I'm so glad it's not normalized in society anymore for people to hurt their kids the way that I was hurt as a kid. I'm so glad people have more opportunities than I had when I was younger, because I don't want people to suffer how I suffered. But instead, what comes out is this disdain for the younger generations being raised differently, despite the fact that the younger generations aren't the ones that hurt you. And looking down on them for not suffering like you did, that's misplaced anger. If someone is acting exactly their age, they haven't been aged past their years by pain or trauma, then we think of them as not as smart or wise or not a part of our little club. But in reality, you shouldn't cringe at them. You should be happy for them. You shouldn't want them to suffer how you suffered because you know how it feels. Why would you be mad at someone else for not having that? Listen, you feel grief and you take it out on people who didn't have to grieve like you did. And it's not fair to them because they're not the ones that grieved you. Their existence just happens to point out to you that the world's not fair and you got the short end of the stick in some ways. People shouldn't have to be traumatized to qualify for your respect. And the problem too is that you're subconsciously sending a message to yourself and to your traumatized friends who are around you when you think and talk like that if I get over my trauma or heal from it, I won't be me anymore. I'll lose my smarts with my cynicism. I'll lose my depressed friends if I get too happy for them to want me around. I'll lose who I am because I've known this tortured version of myself for so long that I don't remember who I was before it. And I'm speaking to myself too. I have to remind myself all the time. I constantly find myself getting mad at things that don't make sense or require any anger at all. I find myself looking at people doing something that I find not very thoughtful, not very demure. And my thought is how immature. They've obviously never been through anything. And it's like, whoa, where did that come from? And it's just insane that I am so prideful to think that, because I don't know about them. When did I become so entitled to other people's identities that I started genuinely believing that I could read and define someone based off of my flash judgments and be accurate without ever checking it with an experience of talking to them or giving them a chance? Let the people who aren't suffering be a reminder to us that we are not defined and don't have to be defined by our suffering. And it's okay to have friends that can understand your suffering firsthand. That's totally fine. It's one of the greatest gifts of life, is not suffering alone. If you have to suffer, it is so beautiful you don't have to do it alone. That there are people who understand exactly what you're going through, or at least something close. And sometimes it is a lifeline in a sea of loneliness. Getting poetic here. And it's important to note, like, I'm not talking about like toxic positivity. It's okay to be upset if people are pushing toxic positivity down your throat because they've never been through anything that's very different. I'm talking about people who just like act their age and it ticks people off. And it's like, of course they're acting their age, that's their age. They're not growing up too fast. Like, why are you mad at that? Just don't allow your mind to breed hatred for people who don't deserve it because your anger doesn't know where to go. Learn how to process your emotions without belittling the positive emotions and lifestyles of others. You're not wise just because you're a cynic, and they're not dumb just because they are happy. In closing, it's not cool and mysterious and alternative to look down on others because they haven't suffered in a way that you have deemed important enough. I know that suffering can feel all-consuming, and that is a legitimate experience. But just remember, suffering isn't who you are, and their lack of suffering isn't who they are either. Judge them for their characteristics. Judge them for who they are. Judge them for how they treat others. Judge them for the quality of their thoughts, not for whether or not they've gone through enough to validate the things that they're saying. You hear me? And again, I am not talking about toxic positivity people, okay? Like, toxic positivity is stupid. Those people, you know, as much as you should love and respect everyone, even if you disagree with them, it's okay to be a little bit upset at them because, you know, it's just very dismissive the way they go through life. My point is, don't be like them. Don't be dismissive in the opposite direction. You hear me? Like, don't be dismissive to people because you're going off of your life experience with no consideration for their life experience. People can become smart and wise and thoughtful without needing to go through something severely traumatizing. Their thoughts and their contributions to the world shouldn't be looked down on because they haven't, you know, like been traumatized. They will suffer. Everyone will suffer in life. Just because they haven't gone through it yet doesn't mean their ideas are worthless. We are all living a human experience, and we can all inspire each other rather than forming cliques and looking down on what we don't understand from our vantage point. I hope you find healing. Take your time if you need to, and make a few friends along the way, whether they understand firsthand exactly what you're going through, or even if they don't and they just like you enough to support you the best way they know how. Not everyone needs to understand you perfectly. It's just the fact that they care enough to try. Okay, love you, bye.